You feel pain like no other pain, and you know that in your life it's going to be very difficult to come across something that's going to be even worse pain than that.
The car didn't crash because someone wanted to hurt him. It crashed because someone wanted to slow him down. There's a difference. And that difference, that razor-thin line between intention and consequence, is what would haunt the next 6 months of the royal family's life. Not the headlines, not the palace statements, not the carefully worded press releases that said everything and nothing at the same time. Just that line, and where it broke. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the call came to William's private secretary. George had been leaving school, a routine pickup, a standard route, 2 protection officers, a driver who had been cleared, vetted, and trusted for 4 years. Everything by the book, everything exactly as it should be. Except the car never arrived at the gate where William was waiting. It arrived eventually, but not at the gate, not on the road. It arrived on the grass, 30 meters from a line of oak trees, with the front quarter panel folded inward, and a crack running up the windshield like a fault line, finding its way to the surface. William didn't wait for the security team. He drove himself. The roads were wet. The wipers moved across the windshield like they were trying to keep up with something. He passed 2 red lights. He didn't remember doing it. He just arrived, parked at an angle on the verge. Door opened before the engine was off. George was sitting in the back seat when William got there. He had one hand pressed to his forehead. The cut wasn't deep, but it was bleeding, and there's something about the sight of your child's blood, even a small amount, even just a thin line of red above his eyebrow, that rearranges something inside a person. Permanently, without permission. William opened the door. "George, are you hurt?" The boy touched his forehead. "It's just a cut. Look at me." He looked up. His eyes were clear. Confused but clear. William exhaled, one long, slow breath, and the muscle below his left ear stopped pulsing. "Okay," William said. "Okay, come here." But what happened next, no one expected. The driver was still in the front seat, both hands on the wheel, not moving, not speaking. One of the protection officers had opened his door and was speaking to him in low, controlled tones, the way you speak to someone who is not quite present anymore. William looked at him across the roof of the car. The driver's eyes were fixed somewhere past the windshield, past the grass, past the trees, past the whole afternoon. William walked around. "What happened?" The driver blinked. He turned his head slowly, as though the question had traveled a great distance before reaching him. "They told me it was a different route," he said. His voice was flat, factual, like he was reading from a document he didn't write. "They told me it was routine." William went still. "Who told you?" The driver opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands were still on the wheel. His knuckles weren't white. That was the strange thing. They were just still. The way hands are when someone has made peace with something they haven't processed yet. "I got a message," the driver said, "this morning, from the office. A route change. They said it was approved." That's where things took a turn. The message had come through on an internal channel. Not unusual. Route changes happened. Traffic, events, security updates. There was always a reason. The driver hadn't questioned it because there was nothing to question. It looked like every other instruction he had ever received. Formatted correctly. Sent from a known address. Authorized, or so it appeared, by someone with the clearance to authorize it. The route it sent him on wasn't dangerous. Not technically. It was a longer way, a back road that curved through a stretch of parkland before rejoining the main route. Quiet, mostly empty, nothing that would raise a flag on a map. Except whoever had sent the message hadn't driven that road in autumn. Hadn't accounted for the mud on the shoulder, softened by 2 weeks of rain. Hadn't accounted for the way the road narrowed after the second bend, or the way the barrier on the left side had been reported, but not yet repaired after a previous incident. When the driver made the turn, calmly, no speed, no alarm, the front left tire caught the shoulder. The car didn't spin. It didn't flip. It just went sideways, slowly, almost gently, the way things fall in dreams. Then the grass. Then the sound of the panel meeting the tree. It should have ended there, but it didn't. Because that evening, when the palace's internal security team began tracing the origin of the route change message, they hit something odd. The sending address existed. It was a real address tied to a real staff account, but the account had been logged into from a device that was not registered to its owner. A secondary login. Brief. Targeted. The kind of thing that could look like a technical glitch if you weren't looking carefully. Someone had used someone else's account to send a message that changed the route of a car carrying the future King of England. William was told this at 11:47 p.m. He was standing in the hospital corridor outside the room where a nurse had just finished closing George's cut with 3 small stitches. Charles was beside him, had been since 8 o'clock when William had called, and Charles had come without asking why. William read the report. He read it twice. Then he folded it, a clean, deliberate fold, the kind that takes effort when your hands want to do something else, and he looked at the far end of the corridor. There was one detail the palace left out of the report. The secondary login device had been traced to a phone registered to a man named Marcus Hale. Senior aide, 12 years of service, trusted, vetted, unremarkable in the best possible sense. He worked for Camilla. There's a particular kind of silence that falls in a room when something unspeakable has just become speakable. It doesn't feel like quiet. It feels like pressure, like the air has gained weight, and everyone in the room is suddenly aware of their own breathing. That was what William felt when Charles said, carefully, with the particular care of a man choosing every syllable like he is defusing something. We don't know what Marcus was acting on. No, William said. We don't. That matters. Yes. William's jaw tightened. It does. Charles looked at him. William, I know, Dad. He turned away from the corridor, toward the window, toward the black glass of the hospital at midnight. His reflection looked back at him, expressionless. I know what we don't have. I also know what we do. What came next, even those closest to them didn't see coming. It took William 4 days to find the deleted messages. Not because he searched for them, because Marcus's phone, recovered by the security team as part of the investigation, had been wiped. Quickly, recently, incompletely. The deletion was thorough enough to look deliberate. It was not thorough enough to survive forensic recovery. What came back was partial, fragmented, the way things are when someone tries to erase them in a hurry, in a state that was probably closer to panic than calm. Most of it was unremarkable, administrative, the noise of a busy senior aide's working life. But there were 3 messages sent and received in the 48 hours before the crash that were not noise. 2 of them were from a number that had since been deactivated. One of them was from a number that William recognized. He sat with the report for a long time. The clock on his desk ticked. He didn't notice it. Outside, it had started to rain, a light, steady rain that had been forecast and arrived exactly on time, the way bad things sometimes do. The message from the recognized number said, he can't be there before 6. I need more time. Handle it. That was all. 3 words. Handle it. Marcus, apparently, had handled it. And that's when everything changed. She hadn't ordered a crash. That was the thing William came back to over and over in the days after he read the message. He is not a man who catastrophizes. He was trained from childhood to read situations with precision, to understand the difference between what is and what appears to be, between what someone did and what someone meant to do. His mother had taught him that in her way. His life had reinforced it. Camilla had not ordered crash. The message didn't say crash. It didn't say harm. It said handle it, which to Camilla had almost certainly meant a wrong turn, a missed exit, a delay, something small and inconvenient that bought her an hour. The kind of thing that in a world where nothing goes wrong would never have mattered. But Marcus had not done something small. Marcus had arranged a route change on a compromised road using a borrowed login without telling anyone the full picture. And somewhere in the translation from handle it to what actually happened, a car had gone sideways on wet grass, and a boy had 3 stitches above his eyebrow. William sat with this for a long time too. Here's what most people missed. The hardest part wasn't the anger. The anger was clean. The anger had a shape. He could hold it and feel its edges and know what it was. The hardest part was the grief. The old, complicated grief of having once called this woman family, of having stood in a room and watched his father smile for the first time in a long time because she was there, of knowing that none of that changed what had happened, and none of it made him feel any less alone in a corridor outside his son's hospital room at midnight. But that wasn't what broke him. What broke him, or came closest to it, was 2 nights after the crash. Past 2 in the morning. The house was dark and quiet, and William had finally, after 4 hours of lying with his eyes open, started to drift. Then the monitor crackled. He was up before he was awake. Down the hall, door open, lamp on. George was sitting up in bed. He wasn't crying. There were no tears, no sound, no visible distress in the way adults imagine distress looks in children. He was just sitting, both hands flat on the duvet, staring at the wall opposite, at nothing, at whatever a 9-year-old stares at when something has happened that he doesn't have words for yet. William sat on the edge of the bed. George didn't speak. He just leaned, slowly, without drama, into his father's shoulder. His head came to rest just below William's collarbone. He let out a breath that seemed to have been waiting some time to leave. William put his arm around him. They stayed like that for an hour. The lamp stayed on. Outside, an owl called once and then went quiet. George's breathing eventually slowed into the long, even rhythm of sleep, but William didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, one hand resting on his son's shoulder, the other flat on his own knee, thinking about 3 words on a recovered message, and what it cost a person to finally understand that love and harm are not always opposites. What happened after that? No one could have predicted. The meeting was Charles's idea. No odds, no secretaries, no record. 3 people in a room on a Thursday evening with the curtains drawn and the fire lit and the kind of quiet that only exists in old buildings when everyone else has gone home. William came in last. He sat across from Camilla without looking at her directly, not out of theater, but because there are some faces you need a moment before you can look at steadily. He placed the printed transcript on the table between them. Camilla looked at it. She didn't pick it up. Her hand went to her throat, then, catching herself, down to her lap. Her thumb pressed against the base of her other thumb, the way it always did when she was holding something back. "I didn't tell him to crash," she said. Her voice was level, not performed, not defensive, just true. "I told him to delay. A wrong turn. A missed exit. That's all I wanted. A silence. I needed more time," she said. "There was a meeting I needed to. It doesn't matter. I needed more time, and I asked him to make it happen, and I didn't ask how." She stopped. "I should have asked how." William looked at her now, and yet George is in the other room with stitches on his forehead. Camilla looked down. Her thumb was still pressing. "I know," she said. "I know." Charles, who had not spoken, made a sound that was not quite a word. He was looking at the space between them, the table, the transcript, the 3 cups of tea no one had touched. His face had the particular stillness of a man who loves 2 people and cannot protect either of them from what the other one is. And then everything stopped, not dramatically, not in the way that stories describe stops. The clock kept ticking. The fire kept burning. Outside, a car passed on the gravel. It stopped the way things stop when everyone in the room has understood something they cannot unsay. William stood. He picked up the transcript. He looked at Camilla for a moment, not with hatred, not with performance, and then he walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. "Marcus is gone by morning," he said. "That's the only thing I'm asking for." He didn't wait for an answer. Marcus Hale submitted his resignation the following morning. No statement, no interview. The palace confirmed only that a member of staff had stepped down to pursue personal commitments. 3 small paragraphs in 2 newspapers, gone by the following news cycle. No one connected it to a car on the grass, and 3 stitches above a boy's eyebrow. No one was meant to. In the weeks after, the changes were so small that most people didn't see them. Camilla's access to certain scheduling channels was quietly reduced. Not removed, reduced. Her influence over certain decisions that had always flowed through her office was gently, efficiently rerouted. No announcement, no explanation. The kind of shift that looks from the outside like administrative tidying. It was not administrative tidying. She kept her title. She kept her role. She stood beside Charles in engagements, and smiled when she was supposed to smile, and said what was expected, and no one watching would have seen anything different. But there are rooms she is no longer in. There are conversations that no longer pass through her. There is a version of the future that was once laid out in a particular way and is now laid out differently. Not publicly, not loudly, just differently. William stood at the window of his son's room that night. Long after George had fallen asleep, long after the house had gone quiet, and the last of the protection team had done their sweep and settled into position. The lamp in the corner made the room amber. George's breathing was slow and even and entirely uncomplicated by the weight of what had happened to him. William watched him for a while. Then he looked out at the dark, at the lawn, at the line where the light from the house ran out, and the night began. Charles sat in his study until past 1 a.m. He was not reading. He was not working. He was looking at a photograph on the shelf. Camilla, years ago, before all of it, in a garden somewhere, laughing at something outside the frame. Before the scrutiny, before the cameras, before the weight of what they would become to each other and to everyone watching. When things were simpler, he looked at it for a long time. Then he turned off the light. Camilla sat in her rooms. The fire had burned low, just embers now, more orange than red, giving more shadow than warmth. She had a book open in her lap that she had not looked at in an hour. She had not told Marcus to crash the car. She had not told him to arrange anything dangerous. She had said 3 words, handle it, and he had taken them somewhere she had never meant them to go. She had thought for 12 years that she knew how he thought. She had been wrong, and the wrongness of that, the gap between her intention and his action, was something she would spend a very long time trying to measure. She did not light the fire again. In a garage on the outskirts of Windsor, behind a pair of locked steel doors, a car sits in the dark. The front quarter panel is still bent. The crack in the windshield has not been repaired. The mud from the grass is still dried on the lower trim, in small crescents, the way mud dries when it has had time to settle. No one has come to collect it. No one has filed the paperwork to have it crushed. It is not evidence anymore, not officially. The investigation is technically resolved, but it sits there anyway, in the dark, because some things are easier to leave where they are than to decide what to do with them. And some things, some small decisions made with something that might have looked in the right light like good intentions, don't get resolved so much as they get put somewhere quiet, behind a locked door where no one has to look at them. Not forgotten, just not looked at. There's a difference.